My duty as an officer is to save human lives.
And action!
We have to show the world that not all of us were like him. Otherwise, this will always be Hitler's Germany.
I was in Germany in early 2002, and I was on a tour of Berlin, and I was taken to the Wendler Block. There's a monument there. It is the only monument to any German soldier who served in World War II. And I became fascinated that these four men, whose names I had never heard, were the only people that were memorialized out of anyone who served in that war.
And that sort of struck a chord with him, and he thought it might be an interesting story to look into. And we started researching it, and he asked if I'd like to write it with him. And so I knew nothing of the subject before that, and I started researching it just, based on this one little experience Chris had.
And through these four people discovered this large network of resistance in which they were involved, and that they were not the only one. But through Stauffenberg, we discovered that there was this humanity within Hitler's Germany that had never been depicted before.
I think there's sort of a misconception about Germans during World War II, and especially Germans that served during World War II, that all Germans in World War II were Nazis. And it became clear very early on in this process that that wasn't the case.
My grandfather wasn't a Nazi. He was an officer in the Wehrmacht. He was deeply opposed to many of the Nazi ideals. But he was a soldier, and he was convinced that that was a good thing. In fact, he believed that his being a soldier and an officer was a service to his country.
As I started to look at this story and the story of the German resistance, I started to discover that it was not so black and white. It was not so cut and dry. It's extremely rich and extremely textured, and I think more than anything, it's extremely exciting. We finished the script and just sat on it. We would tinker with it here and there, put it away, go on to other projects, and always come back to it. We were not in any hurry to submit it to studios. We weren't in any hurry to get it made. We wanted to find the right place and the right people who were really interested in the material.
In the summer of 2006, Brian had actually read the script, and he approached Chris and said that he would be interested in directing it. And if we were going to give it to somebody to do, we felt very comfortable giving it to Brian.
Chris and I have grown up together, and we've known each other since our parents ran for township committee back in Princeton Junction, New Jersey.
And they had worked together on The Usual Suspects, and we were looking for a chance to work together again, had been for quite a while.
He and I grew up together watching World War II movies, and we've always been fascinated in the period. We've always been fascinated with Nazi Germany, and you can see the influence of that fascination in Brian's earlier work. Obviously, A Pupil, the opening of X-Men.
We used to make war films in my backyard. In fact, we would, on the set of Valkyrie, we would joke about it. We said, wow, now we got better uniforms, better helmets, real planes, and Tom Cruise. Action.
God promised Abraham he would not destroy Sodom if he could find just 10 righteous men. I have a feeling that for Germany, it may come down to one.
The first time I met Bryan Singer was actually at the Mission Impossible premiere. And I'd just seen Usual Suspects a bit before that. And we started talking. I said, I'd really like to work with you. So years passed, and this script came along, and Brian said, I'm very interested in directing you in this piece. And they came to my house and gave me the book, the biography, and I started doing research on this time period.
How Tom ended up in this film all came about somewhat organically. When it was time to go out with the script, we went to United Artists and met with Tom Cruise as the head of a studio, and it was when Brian brought out some of the research material and laid down a photograph of Stauffenberg, and everybody was just sort of looking at the picture.
Well, Tom Cruise is dream casting for this role. He does look very similar. His core is very dedicated to truth, whether it's filmmaking or in his private life. I think there's great similarity between the core of what Stauffenberg was all about and what Tom Cruise is all about.
I think it's a tremendous coup to have Tom Cruise play Klaus von Stauffenberg. It's, I think, casting kind of made in heaven. Apart from the fact that it gives the film opportunities that the film would otherwise not have. Millions of people will watch this movie because they want to see Tom Cruise, because he's one of the most popular actors in the world.
Can these men see it through?
Come and hear what they have to say.
Bryan Singer is such a terrific director. Tom Cruise is so brilliantly cast, and Chris McQuarrie and Nathan Alexander did something that you couldn't put down in this screenplay. So I'm not surprised that so many really very talented people joined up.
Well, we really cast every part very specifically, very carefully, and wanted the best performance we could possibly get.
I don't think you can put enough value on familiar faces in a film. There's just an air of legitimacy added to a film when you've got actors you recognize that you feel comfortable with. When you see Terrence Stamp and Kenneth Branagh and Bill Nye up there, and these are quality actors that help you believe that it's real.
Not only are all of them great actors, each one is pitch perfect playing the person they are depicting. They're all playing real people from history, and so it's fascinating to be standing in a room and see them brought to life.
I'm engaged in high treason with all means available to me. Can I count you in?
For anything, sir. To do this story justice was to try and be as authentic as possible. We went into in-depth research, books, libraries, DVDs. Fortunately here, when we came to Berlin, there's actually a media archive, which was very helpful.
Every day, for the months that we prepared the film, it just never ended. The research, the learning, the education, the edification. So every day in every department informed the film. And we're all going for the same thing, that authenticity.
Bryan was constantly searching for what was authentic and at the same time something we had never seen before.
All movies require the work of a great team, production designer, photography, art director. There's a richness to the costumes by Joanna Johnson. Everything was custom made, from the boots to the hats to the emblems, and it shows.
Joanna, who I've worked with fortunately many times, she's brilliant, and it's a very challenging task to do this. But when I put the uniform on, I repelled it at first, actually.
Put on these clothes, and you immediately, you're not sitting like I'm sitting now. You just, it puts you up right away, and your body is moving differently. Your head is not shaking like that anymore, and it does something to you. Many of the German military had a very strong sense of how important their look was, how important the uniform was. Aside from pride in the uniform, was a sense of how good they looked and what an impact it could make. You start to feel that once you put those boots on, and once you see the detail that they took with how they presented themselves.
And then the swastika is also weird, because you get used to that, but once you see it all around and you put up a ton of flags, and so you just get used to them.
There's certain parts where we have lots of flags. For example, at the Messe Berlin, there's one scene and we actually had 120 swastikas flying.
And so we shot at actual locations. We shot in Berlin.
And there isn't any other place that we would shoot this movie besides Berlin.
The scene today is that after Stauffenberg put Valkyrie in place, so what we see is a street blocking with troops of the Großdeutschland Guard.
It's called the Messegelände. It's a nice old Nazi building. And so we are, as Berliners, we are so used to the place, just like being there, and suddenly you have all these Nazi flags, and it felt surreal to the Berliners as well, believe me. And I noticed all the people walking by or driving by, they were kind of in shock a little bit,
One woman came to one of our locations who was there, who was living there when it happened, and she was astonished.
I didn't know that there will be scenes about this movie, but then when I came and saw the flags, I thought, my God, this looks so very well known to me.
She saw the Wehrmacht soldiers. We had 300 of them out that day. And she sat behind the monitor and watched us shoot a scene.
And roll camera, action!
Being able to film this story in the place where it happened, I think has fueled everybody from the directors and writers to the actors with a kind of immediacy and a sort of almost like the ghosts of times gone by are pulling strings and infusing everything that people do with the history of this story.
This is a military operation. Nothing ever goes according to plan.
The Wendler Block is such a special place, or place of special sanctity, you might even say, because the 4 officers, Stauffenberg and the other 3, were shot here.
Initially, I wanted to shoot at the Wendler Block because it was authentic and because I had had a wonderful experience touring the Resistance Museum there. And I felt that since they had shot there before, it would be welcome, and then we had difficulties.
The question was, would the movie sort of mirror this special meaning, or would it be contrary to the special meaning?
I think there were a lot of misunderstandings initially. I think there were maybe perhaps some sort of knee-jerk reactions to Hollywood coming, and what was Hollywood going to do with this very German story that Germans are quite familiar with and quite rightly proud of.
The decision had been passed that shooting here would be a problem because of the special meaning of the place, the special sanctity or dignity of the place.
I know that Tom Cruise himself took a huge lead role in getting together behind the scenes with policymakers, just getting to a point where we could get to the table with the government officials and be able to explain what it is we were trying to do.
Well, it was so important that I wouldn't have made the film if I couldn't shoot in those locations.
We had a discussion also with some people of this production here, and my impression immediately was that they were doing a very thorough, thoughtful, and good piece of work.
We just wanted to say a few words honoring the occasion and honoring the place that we're shooting.
We started the evening with a moment of silence and with statements by Tom Cruise and the producers and the writers of the significance of being there.
Now, obviously, it's to be here tonight is important for this film, and again, I want to thank everyone involved, all the efforts to get us here, the efforts to make this picture. It's a very personal film for all of us involved, and it is a great honor for me to play this character, to represent the spirit of this man.
It didn't hit me until we were there, until we did the first few takes of the executions. It didn't hit me till that moment how happy I was that we had that location.
I've had so many German members of our crew come over to me and thank me for making this happen, for shooting here, especially for shooting here.
I've stood on the spot where my character was shot. I've stood in his office, the very room where all of this takes place.
To see these actors who are very dedicated to their roles stand in the place where these characters stood that night, and here we were shooting this with firing squad. There they are, pit of sand, as it was.
Look like sacred Germany!
You know, I really can't find the words to articulate what those evenings were like, and to be there and to think about that. It was invaluable. You can't qualify what it was like to shoot in those places.
It shows for the first time to the world that not every German was a killer, not every German was a Nazi, and that there has been some resistance. That's a very, very important point.
And I find that as brave, if not braver, a choice to oppose Adolf Hitler when you are German than someone from the outside who's come to stop him.
Every project I take, there's a reason behind it. It's in some way cathartic for me. I give that year or more of my life to the film unconditionally for a reason.
I think that everybody wants to identify in a positive way with your country, and that was stolen from us. This movie, I hope, it's going to change the view on our country in a very strong way.
It was intense at times and very difficult, but also mixed in with the exhilaration of making a movie, and a movie on this scale. So it was also, you know, thrilling.
We can serve Germany or the Fuhrer, not both.
It's just that sort of talk that has you sent here, Colonel.
Here we go, rehearsing.
He was sent to North Africa because he was outspoken about Hitler. There was concern as to his well-being if he was not sent away.
At this point in the war, the German army was losing North Africa by degrees. And the 10th Panzer Division was on retreat as they were being pushed back both by the Americans and by the British.
They were attacked by British aircraft. He lost his eye, his right hand, and 2 fingers on his left.
This sequence is basically the moment that Stauffenberg gets his terrible injuries that we see through the rest of the film.
This is a very realistic type film. The movie has been incredibly well researched, so we wanted to be as truthful and as close to reality as the real story was, because the real story stands on its own legs.
The sequence in North Africa, we were originally going to shoot abroad. So I scouted Jordan, I scouted Aqaba, the Middle East, I scouted Spain.
What happened was that when we got to Germany, we started to meet members of Stauffenberg's family. We started to meet people who knew members of the German resistance. So as we began to learn more and more about these people, who they were and what their motives were, we began to reassess Africa and the way it was written. So we decided to put Africa aside and finish the movie. We waited to shoot this sequence so that we got it right, that we understood who the character was and what he was thinking and what he was feeling when he was there.
But in the end, Cougar Buttes, Victorville, looks more like Tunisia than any place on earth, except maybe Tunisia.
And action and dust.
We've had a very filthy time here in the desert. We've been blowing a lot of dust products around just to, you know, simulate after explosions and what we did with the big bangs.
We made a conscious decision on this one. We wouldn't go for the usual fireballs that you get in movies. We've gone for more cement dust look effect on this with a flash and an impact in the center of it.
We wanted a real sense of reality and danger and the dirt and the horror of war. And this man right in the middle of all this horror. It's not pretty, it's not romantic, it's not heroic, generally speaking, you know what I mean? It's got to be down and dirty. We've done some huge explosions, like stuff going over 125 feet in the air. That requires a lot of force and a lot of energy, so we were using high explosives. Then the issue is, how can you do that safely and put somebody safely close to it? So basically what we were doing was building big shape charges here and generating and shooting our forces vertically and then being able to direct the energy so carefully and so reliably that we could predict exactly how it was going to behave when we popped it, so we could stick somebody in an area we knew was going to be a safe zone. Good morning, Tom.
How you hit the ground? We've got a load of this cover. All the stunts have basically been designed for Tom, where Tom does them all himself. I haven't doubled Tom at all in this.
Right over here, we have a tank that we blew. That was probably our biggest explosion with the actors. Bernard Hill and Tom Cruise were right on top of that explosion when it went.
And we've actually come up with, I think, some great looking explosions and very realistic. Looking at the footage and the photographs of the Second World War, I think the dust adds so much to it.
Here we go, and action!
Colonel, my orders are to advance to Sidi Mansour and hold it. That's what we'll do.
The British are moving up from the south. Pat is closing in on the coast. You know we should have left 2 days ago.
It's not at all easy to find authentic vehicles from this time period because they're in big collections, a lot of them, and they're worth a lot of money. We've got a wide spectrum of all German Army vehicles. We've got the motorcycles with sidecars, we've got lorries, everything with the authentic number plates and period stamps, the right colours, the right markings. Everything's carefully researched to make it 100% authentic.
Roll, please. Rolling. And moving, action!
The only challenge with the vehicles on this one is which ones you pick to blow up, because they're obviously somebody's pride and joy, they're collector's pieces, so I hate it when you blow up their favourite toys.
The vehicles in Africa that we blow up will be Eastern European vehicles from the Czech Army, and we're going to convert those to World War II Mercedes trucks. The process to convert them has to rely on the authenticity of the vehicle. It must look right at the end of the conversion. So we've picked vehicles with skinny wheels, with the right wheel plan. The chassis will be cut in halves with quick release sections, so those will be very, very carefully prepared vehicles which will completely blow apart.
How was it, Brian? Did you shoot it?
Yes! That was awesome. Nice job.
I'd never worked with Brian before, but I must say it was absolute joy. He's been fantastic. He gave me his take on what he'd like to see, and I read the script. But I came out here and planned everything. He flew in the night before we started shooting. I showed him what I plotted out, the route the aeroplanes were going to take and what the effects were going to be. He's absolute treasure to work with. He's fantastic.
You know, in the world of modern visual effects, it's rarer and rarer, particularly with equipment this old, that we get to shoot with real aircraft and all this real material. It was a very cool experience.
To be there on set and see what it was that we were creating, the level of detail and authenticity that every department was pushed to create.
All right, here we go, guys.
Bring that fan on. Dust me out. Come on, we're fighting the wind.
There you go. Go. There you go. All right, good.
Exciting, very powerful, and definitely added the story and emotional dynamic of the film.
Slowly.
It's a rare opportunity to have live aircraft, and it adds an authenticity to the picture.
It's great to have real aeroplanes in movies. You know, I've seen a lot of movies where the flying has been CGI'd, and you can always tell the difference.
We were asked to try and get as original as we possibly could because they're looking for authenticity on the film.
It's a German convoy after their defeat at the Battle of El Alamein, retreating from the British and the Allies, and then the column is attacked by British warplanes.
There were some issues about what aircraft to use, and during this campaign, the RAF did use a number of aircraft, Spitfires. We opted for Curtiss P-40s.
Big gun! Cut!
And, fortunately, we were able to get Steve and John Hinton to fly them, who are the best in the movie business to fly this kind of stuff. The P-40 is running about 1,200 horsepower, runs a Allison V12, and they are running about 180 knots, about 200 miles an hour. And some of the passes were pretty much pedal to the metal, for 20, 25 feet up. Certainly lower than most people are used to having aircraft pass over their heads. In any case, they are loud, they don't have mufflers, and they're coming through here at warp 9, and it's a terrific sound.
Hey, Matt, thank you. That was incredible. That was incredible. You're getting applause down here, buddy.
We're very fortunate in the aviation world here to have a person like Tom who appreciates these kind of airplanes, and I've watched him while we're on set here, and every time we fly the airplanes, he's got a big grin.
That was incredible. Great job. Thank you very much.
We have Hitler's arrival, where the Junkers are actually being escorted by the fighters. We also have another scene where the airplane arrives with our hero.
Yeah, of course I love the airplanes in the movie. I love aviation, so we had authentic World War II aircraft in there, Messerschmitt 109 and the Junker.
The Messerschmitts are protecting the Junkers, and so each of the shots in the film are the Junkers are there and the Messerschmitts are protecting them from enemy aircraft.
This is the first time ever on screen that I think we are seeing a genuine Messerschmitt 109 fighter with the correct engine in it. So it's quite a coup, really. I've been in the business for 40 years and I've never seen one flying before him.
There are very few of these left in the world. In fact, the one I bought from the UK is the only flying one in the UK.
Messerschmitt, we are actually filming you from the far end of the runway, so we do need you to continue with that low run over the top of them when they pass this position.
People look at the aeroplanes when they're flying, obviously. Of course, we are carrying swastikas for the filming. They are illegal in Germany, normally.
Germany is one of the few countries that actually has a ban on flying aircraft with swastikas. In England, you can have swastikas for historical purposes and for accuracy. In Germany, they have a rule that I think if you run around with a swastika, you get 10 years in jail or something.
But we're very conscious of the, of the nationals here, and so we blank them out as soon as we leave the set.
I would think there's probably about 6 or so Ju-52 Junkers flying in the world today. These are proper, full public transport aircraft, so the pilots have to have commercial licenses and be type rated to be able to do the work that we're doing.
I think the biggest challenge is to be able to get the chance to fly this old lady built in '39. So it's what, nearly 70 years old, because all the modern aircraft we're flying today, they have computers, screens, it's all kind of help you have in the aircraft, and this is just the machine and you.
To be able to shoot in those airplanes, particularly the big Junker, that's what, we shot live in there. Actually, Brian was there with me, and we couldn't have a lot of crew on there, so that's where Brian was actually directing me and doing the hair and makeup at the same time, because we couldn't have them on board when we were doing it.
I got a quick lesson in how to do makeup. So in between shots of Tom in the airplane, I would proceed to dab his face with the makeup applicator. So I kept swatting him in the face, and I would not ever become a professional makeup person.
I'll stay on 3.
And once we just kind of ran out of film, Tom Cruise just basically started encouraging the pilots just to have fun. And we're doing some crazy things.
Geez, we were just about to do a loop.
Tom, because he's a pilot, took control of the aircraft and actually took this 70-year-old World War II plane into a full wing over about 200 feet above the forest.
Flying the Junker was a lot of fun. They had great pilots on board, and I got to get behind that and fly it around. Very easy. It's like a big boat, that airplane.
Tom landed the plane. Tom landed the plane.
And we came into land so many times, and we just immediately take off again. Eventually I was going, no, don't take off!
Jamie Parker was his first day shooting on the movie, and he's like The plane's up on its side. We're looking down at the tops of trees, and I think Jamie's wondering, is every day going to be like this?
I think CGI works very well if you're doing background aircraft in movies. However, if you're going close in on them, I think it's very, very obvious that it is CGI, and it hasn't quite replaced me yet. So we're still on camera with the real airplanes, and I think that's the way to be.
I've done films based on books and comic books and original material, but this is my first film based on a true event. I was shooting it in Berlin, where it happened, and so to be able to give it that texture, that sense of the tapestry of the time.
I think all of us who work with Brian are massive history buffs to begin with. But coming here, the tragedy of the history here is something that really physically manifests itself.
To be in those places was absolutely invaluable. I think not only for me playing the character, but for telling the story.
We want to be accurate and true to the facts, which is difficult from the outset because it's not 1944 anymore. How do you recreate something that's no longer in existence?
Berlin in the spring of 1944 was nearing total destruction. It had been heavily bombed throughout the war years.
Most of the original structures, most of the sense of what the city was at that time, it was gone.
Even if you find one building, there'd be one building on an entire block of modern buildings.
And the more that we scouted Berlin and the surrounding neighborhoods like Potsdam, we were able to find places that actually are a part of history.
There's a few which we've been very fortunate to film at. We filmed at the former Luftwaffe headquarters, which is now the Ministry of Finance. We filmed at another building, which is Tempelhof Airport.
Background, action!
The Messe Hall, Berlin, which is still in existence, which was built by the Nazis for the World Fair in 1933.
Action!
We used the real exterior of the Stauffenberg house for the exterior of the Stauffenberg house. We couldn't go inside because it's now 4 different flats instead of one singular interior, but nonetheless, the cobblestones are the same cobblestones, the lamps are the same gas lamps, and the exteriors of the homes are the same homes that were there when Stauffenberg walked down that street with his family.
The military hospital, that was a great find. A part of the actual ward that we were filming in was for respiratory problems. And I think that Hitler supposedly was actually treated there at one point. But it had been left for about the last 11 years. So it was in a really bad state of disrepair. It's amazing how fast buildings can decay once they're not inhabited. But it was nice to be able to transform it.
Any problem on Earth can be solved with a careful application of high explosives.
One of the extraordinary things is that when they were looking for the house where they conspired, they found a suitable period house, substantial house obviously, and were preparing to shoot in it and at the very last minute they switched to another appropriate, suitable period, substantial house, which unbeknownst to anybody turned out to be the house where they actually plotted.
We discovered after we got the location that Stauffenberg had actually been there.
We have to kill Hitler.
A member of the crew showed up with his great aunt, who was 81 years old, and started telling us stories of how she lived in that house.
It was her family home, and her father was part of the resistance. She actually lost her father. After the July 20th plot, her father was killed. We spent many hours hearing the stories and looking at the photos and realizing that these men were there in that place. Things like that were happening all the time during the making of this picture.
This is a military operation. Nothing ever goes according to plan.
Most of our sets have been locations.
For example, a lot of the scene takes place in our war ministry, which is on set. about 1,000 square meters.
Führer's fine.
That is a lie.
Adolf Hitler is dead. Operation Valkyrie is in effect.
The Wolf's Lair, obviously, we didn't shoot in Poland, but it's a German forest.
And that obviously brings up all kinds of different things because you're trying to build something outdoors, which took Hitler 2 years, and I think he had 2,000 Polish workers, but we had considerably less time and considerably less resources. So we have an amazing set decorator on the film called Bernhard Heinrich, who has managed to get all kinds of artifacts from all over Germany, from Vienna, from England, some stuff from the States, from collectors, from museums, from just about everywhere.
If you go to Brandt's office, this is real stuff. First you do a big research, you know, and then you find out how everything was looking like, and then you try to find the stuff, and then, of course, you end up finding the real stuff. I actually did not specifically look for, you know, what Hitler had on his desk or what he was using. You just, after the research you have to do for every location, you look for the cliché, how this should look like, you know, and then you look for the real stuff, and then finally you end up with finding some Nazi eagles, swastikas, and that kind of stuff.
Very important for this film was we wanted to give it a sense of reality. So it's not a sense that you're looking back at something that happened 50, 60 years ago. What we wanted to try and do was bring it to a contemporary audience with a contemporary feel.
As a producer, I can tell you it ended up costing more because we had to recreate that world, and if we had gone to someplace like St. Petersburg or Prague or something, or even Budapest, it would have been less expensive for us. But it was the right choice, and I think that sense of history that you live walking the streets of Berlin infuses both the performances and also the way that Brian is directing the picture.
Very often films of this era are muddied or made to look like black and white because that's how we've seen them in newsreels. But in reality, Germany had a lot of architecture, design, color, and detail that I wanted to show people that they might not have seen before.
The burning of 20,000 books in Berlin's Bebelplatz on 10th of May 1933 marks the rise of the Nazi Party and the ascent of Adolf Hitler. Though the Nazis had a firm grip on Germany and later on much of Europe, not all Germans were Nazis, nor did they all support Hitler. In fact, there was a very real resistance to him within Germany. Hello, I'm Philipp von Schultes, and my grandfather, Klaus von Stauffenberg, was the military leader of the resistance group that attempted to assassinate Adolf Hitler and take charge of government on 20th of July 1944 in a plot known as Operation Valkyrie. I'd like to take you on a tour of some of the important locations in my grandfather's life. Behind me, you see contemporary Berlin. Join me now as I take a look back in time at the Berlin of 1944.
Members of the aristocracy naturally became resistors out of a sense of honor because many of them were outraged by the crimes that were being committed by the regime. And when the mass killings started, they had to draw a line.
I'm walking on Tristanstrasse in Wannsee, Germany. Wannsee was a wealthy suburb of Berlin and home to Nazis, senior military officers, as well as my grandfather. Klaus von Stauffenberg was not a member of the Nazi Party. He lived in this house behind me with his brother Berthold. His family, wife Nina and the 4 children, lived in Bamberg, which was a fortunate move because Bamberg was one of the few cities not to be destroyed in World War II. At the time of the plot against Hitler, Nina was pregnant with their 5th child, my mother Constanze. Today, this home is subdivided into 4 different units, and on the street outside, there's a plaque acknowledging that this is the one-time residence of Klaus von Stauffenberg. Now a museum, this was my grandfather's office. It is in the heart of Berlin, on a street that was once called Bendlerstrasse. Co-conspirator General Friedrich Olbricht, one of Stauffenberg's superiors, had an office in the same building. And I've often wondered how many times they must have frantically crossed these corridors on July the 20th while their plan was slowly slipping away from them. The resistance couldn't meet openly or in public, nor could they discuss their plans in their offices for fear of being discovered. So they met in private residences, amongst them this house in Potsdam. The home was owned by the von der Lancken family. The children were told to stay away from this part of the house as the conspirators met. But one surviving daughter, Maria Antonia, has her own tale to tell of the secret meetings and of what she remembers.
Mein Vater hat eingeladen die Offiziere vom OKH, unter anderem General Olbricht, Stauffenberg, und die waren öfters Gäste bei meinem Vater zum Abendessen. Und wir Kinder, Stauffenberg besonders imponiert, weil er eben eine Augenklappe hatte und schwer verletzt war vom Krieg aus Afrika, dass der als erstes, was er tat, wenn er bei uns reinkam, sämtliche Kissen nahm und aufs Telefon packte. Und als wir abends später oder am nächsten Tag meine Eltern fragten, warum er das tat, bis hier mein Vater sagte, na, der hat nur Angst gehabt, dass er vielleicht irgendwie abgehört wird. Deshalb hat er das auf Telefon gelegt.
The fear of the knock on the door at 5 in the morning and the fear of anyone wearing a leather coat, the sense that the Gestapo were everywhere, and a system of spying of people on each other that was encouraged and was in fact instituted by the Nazis. There were very large apartment complexes. There were people appointed to spy on the tenants and to report anything unusual that they noticed. And if somebody had said, I don't like this war or something, off into concentration camp they would go.
This is the spot where at one time the bomb was kept hidden. Of course, Adolf Hitler survived the assassination attempt. And with Operation Valkyrie having failed, Stauffenberg's immediate superior, General Friedrich Fromm, issued an order to have him executed at once. It was on this courtyard below me that my grandfather was executed in the early hours of July 21st, 1944, along with 3 other conspirators.
Those were the first executions, which were very unpopular with the justice and police authorities because there had been no opportunity to interrogate. But in the first 2 to 3 weeks, about 700 people were arrested in connection with the conspiracy. Their names had been found on lists or in notebooks or had otherwise been known or betrayed in some cases.
The People's Court was set up by Hitler to try those accused of political offenses. It was overseen by Dr. Roland Freisler. No real trials took place behind these walls. In fact, historians consider them nothing more than mock trials, which resulted in everyone involved or rumored to be involved in a July 20th conspiracy to be found guilty. They were all sentenced to death.
The first trial was held on the 7th and 8th of August, and they were instructed to prosecute cases of political offenses, subversion, defeatism.
In a twisted bit of irony, Freisler was killed in his own courthouse when he was hit by Allied bombing on 3rd of February 1945. At the time, he was hearing the case of Fabian von Schlabrendorf, one of the conspirators. Freisler was struck by a ceiling beam and killed. The bombing effectively saved Schlabrendorf's life. Schlabrendorf was subsequently sent to various concentration camps and was liberated by US forces in May of 1945. In Valkyrie, I play the part of Schlabrendorf. The Plötzensee prison is where those convicted in the People's Court were executed for their participation in a July 20th plot. Today, it is a memorial to the victims of the Hitler dictatorship. It is documented that 89 people involved in the plot were executed in this room. Amongst them, Klaus von Stauffenberg's brother, Berthold. Rumors have long existed that they were hung from piano wires to make their deaths more painful, and that Hitler regularly watched film of their executions.
The first 8 executions on the 8th of August and a dozen subsequent executions were in fact filmed, and Hitler did watch filming of the hangings. And I have spoken with people including former munitions minister Albert Speer, who confirmed that stills from the films were on Hitler's map table.
35 years after the war, the German government established a memorial to the resistance movement. A plaque and wreath hang on the wall near where my grandfather was executed. There is also a museum here that documents the resistance movement during World War II in Germany. And Stauffenbergstrasse is the name of the street that was once known as Bendelstrasse. I'm Philipp von Schultes. Thank you and goodbye.